In this presentation, we're going to be discussing the economic costs of the Ferguson riots.
On August 11th, unarmed Michael Brown was shot and killed by police officer Dan Wilson. Michael Brown's hometown of Ferguson, Missouri retaliated by rioting the city and demolishing many buildings and protesting the police. The economic costs of the riots are explored throughout this presentation. Because of this, police officers around the country and departments are rethinking their ways of monitoring their officers and interactions with civilians. The innovation of surveillance is what these departments are looking for to improve the quality of evidence that can be retained when cases like this are brought up.
The communities of Ferguson will face serious ramifications following the riots. They will face long-term and short-term effects. During the riots, businesses slow down and or stop. There is looting, vandalism, and arson. In Ferguson, Missouri, there was $4.2 million done in damage following the riots. With this damage requires large cleanup projects by the government, which will lead to increased taxes for the community of Ferguson. Huge amount of property damage is done and businesses are harmed. Some businesses are even put out of business. Ferguson is faced with many long-term effects from the riots as well. Some of these effects are the businesses are destroyed and put out of business, and future businesses will be reluctant to make business in this area affected by the riots. Property value decline in this area and economic activity goes down as well. The riots haunt the areas affected for a long time after.
Following the riots in Ferguson and the death of Michael Brown came police departments all over the country changing their methods of surveillance and how they will be keeping control of their officers when it comes to civilian interactions. On July 17th in New York City, the NYPD tried to apprehend a suspect known as Eric Gardner, which later led to him resisting arrest and later being put in a chokehold, which led to his death. After that, the police commissioner and the mayor decided that a back-of-the-mind idea of wearing body cameras on each officer should be put into effect. And about a month ago, that was put into effect, where 60 cops were given a test run or a pilot, and they were usually from precincts who were in high crime areas, such as East New York, in Brooklyn and Brownsville, Staten Island's 120th precinct where Eric Gardner actually died, and precincts various in the Bronx and Harlem. The initial cost of these cameras for the 60 officers was about $60,000, and that is not including how much it costs for them to store it. When we have a bunch of cameras being put on officers, police officers feel as though their privacy is being invaded, which is part of the pushback against mostly de Blasio, the mayor of New York, because he was the one who pushed for it. But this is definitely not a cheap thing and not a cheap program. There are two companies, one known as Vievu and another model is built by a company known as Taser. Both make other police equipment. If it is only costing about $60,000 for the cameras at the initial cost for 60 officers, that excludes the 35,000 other police officers in the NYPD. So the cost for this could be absolutely enormous. Another thing to think about is the pushback from civilians when it comes to this, because if they're going to want, freedom of information to be released to them, then these cameras are just a gold mine for what people could use against the police. The NYPD is one of the largest police departments in the world, and it is basically an army in the sense of, or compared to other police departments around the country. Trying to put an army into a police state is basically a recipe for disaster, not only because the NYPD has such a massive size, but because of the problems that it's running with protesters and other such in conflicts with civilians.